Hello there. It's 11 o'clock, so we're going to go get started. My name is Quentin Russell, and I am the Content Marketing Specialist here at Doc365. And today, as part of our ongoing weekly webinar series, we're going to be talking about how AI is set to revolutionize contract lifecycle management. So, with that said, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, we're going to be covering who we are at Doc365. So our history, what we've done, who we are. And from there, we'll be going over what artificial intelligence is, because I know a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about it. They're not quite sure what it is. They've heard the buzzword floating around. And I just want to make sure that we all have the same operational definition going forward. After that, we'll be talking about how AI will affect contract management. So the specific areas that it'll be used in. And then after that, we'll be going over the benefits of AI in contract management. So what are the concrete, actual benefits that are going to help businesses as they begin to implement AI in their contract management processes? And then finally, we'll be doing a question and answer session at the end. So the way that'll work is if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type them out in the chat. I will then go through those at the end. If there's anything I'm unable to answer, I will send those out alongside the webinar recording that will be going out later today. So with that said, who are we? So we're Doc365. We're a company located in Jacksonville, Florida. We have over 17 years of experience working with SharePoint to deliver exceptional productivity solutions. We've worked with a wide range of companies in a variety of industries to implement a diverse array of SharePoint productivity tools. So these include intranet portals, contract management systems, CRM solutions, and more. You could say we do know a little bit about artificial intelligence and contract management. We are actually currently working on implementing AI into our own contract management system, which will be available by the end of Q2. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to set up a demo with us. We can kind of talk about that, go over how that works, and when you can kind of start expecting to see that. With that said, let's get on to why you guys are actually here. So, like I said, we're going to first start talking about what artificial intelligence is so that we all have the same operational definitions. So artificial intelligence is essentially a wide-ranging branch of computer science that is involved with building smart machines or code capable of performing tasks that usually require human intelligence. It's essentially developed through the use of machine learning and deep learning, which seem like interchangeable definitions, but they are somewhat different. Now, AI is defined by these four, tenets. So in order for artificial intelligence to truly be considered intelligent or pass the Turing test, which was developed by Alan Turing, and it basically just determines whether a artificial intelligence is truly a human level intelligence, but essentially it needs to be able to think humanly, it needs to be able to think rationally, it needs to be able to act humanly, and it needs to be able to act rationally. So basically the first two are more concerned with thought processes and reasoning, while the other two are more with the actual behavior of the system. Now, we can kind of track a lot of that because AI is essentially just code, it's a machine. So we can track both ends of that and we can determine and measure that. Now, the thing is that AI isn't just kind of AI. There are two broad categories that artificial intelligence really falls into. So these are essentially artificial general intelligence, which is essentially strong AI. But this is basically what you see in movies. So think Data from Star Trek, think Skynet, maybe don't think Skynet. That's a little unfortunate, but, think a lot of the different sorts of just machines that you've seen. Honestly, like Wreck-It Ralph, which from the Disney movie is technically quote unquote artificial intelligence, but is essentially indistinguishable from a human. And it can essentially apply intelligence to solve any sort of problem, the same way that you or I would be able to apply intelligence to solve a problem. Meanwhile, on the other end with the different categories, you have narrow AI. So this is also known as weak AI. So this is essentially artificial intelligence that operates within a very limited context and only really simulates human intelligence. Generally what happens is that it's a bit of code, a machine that has been trained to do one task extraordinarily well. And this is generally where a lot of the artificial intelligence that you're going to be seeing in business productivity tools come in over the next couple of years. Strong AI is, well, it's very difficult, and as far as I'm aware, there are very few actual applications of it, very few examples of it, and it's also ridiculously expensive. But narrow AI is actually pretty inexpensive, and a lot of companies are beginning to actually apply that to their productivity tools, including contract management systems. So basically, here's how AI is trained and developed. So essentially, through the use of machine learning and deep learning. Now, these are somewhat different. So machine learning essentially feeds a computer data and uses statistical techniques to essentially help it learn how to get better at a task without having it to specifically program for the task, eliminating the need for coding. So instead of having to do a bunch of if-then statements and having to anticipate all the eventualities, you essentially kind of train a machine like a dog to do the same thing over and over again. So it's essentially like you have a clicker, you have a treat, or the code version of that. And every time the machine does it right, you essentially reward it, creating a positive feedback that it can then follow to perform that task. And then it can perform it as it does it more accurately. It can then begin to do it faster and faster and faster and faster. Meanwhile, deep learning, it essentially runs inputs through a biologically inspired neural network, kind of like a brain, and it can contain many hidden layers through which data is processed. So it essentially allows the machine to go deep and make connections and weigh input for best results. So essentially, this is kind of more for predictive AI. It can essentially take data that you give it to it and create a series of outcomes, probabilities, possibilities, and kind of display those for you so that you can keep track of important information and kind of anticipate things based on data that you might not be able to see. So yeah, that's machine learning, that's deep learning. Now, ideally, AI can essentially, these are the sorts of tasks that AI can perform. So it can recognize speech and objects, and actually be able to interpret them. It can make decisions based on data. It can help translate languages. It can also predict outcomes based on data. So not only just, does it have the ability to say, we should do this based on that, but you can also say, once we do this based on that, this is the most likely outcome for that. And then finally, it can interpret meaning / intent of either text or speech based on context. So basically, if you were to give it like a book, it would say you give it like one of the Harry Potter books, it would actually be able to interpret the actual meaning of the book and determine that it was in fact not, and it was a fictional piece of work, and that it was a story as opposed to being a literal document and interpreting everything at face value and applying what it found there to the real world. So with that operational set of definitions set up, let's talk about how AI is going to affect contract management. So first of all, one of the first things it can do is it can help companies create standardized templates for drafting contracts. Another thing it can help do is determine the type of contract that you're working with based off of the language used in the contract. Another thing it can do is you can train AI to assist in different processes. So kind of going along with that deep in machine learning, getting it to understand what needs to happen, the next parts of the process, so you don't have to be as involved. And then you can also set up AI to search contracts and identify obligations based off, your obligations, your expirations, your renewals, different information that you need from those contracts. And then you can also set it up to determine what clauses are missing from a contract and flag problematic clauses. Now, there are other things that AI can do. These are just the high level things, kind of the most obvious uses that a lot of people are beginning to use right now. So for instance, when it comes to creating standardized templates for drafting contracts, so essentially Rather than having to build out contracts each time, you can actually set up AI to help you develop a standardized contract template based off of previous contracts you've created. So it can suggest things that you should be adding, things that you could potentially take out that aren't maybe necessary. It can also help you determine what should be part of your templates if you are using a template, and really streamline the contract creation process. So it can, so if there's certain values, if there are certain aspects of a contract that you might need for this contract, but not for another one, the AI would be able to take a look at those contracts, examine the context, see the information you've put in already, and make suggestions for you based on that information. Another one is determining the type of contract based on language. So it can essentially help you add and store contracts to your system by determining key information such as the type of contract, the associated parties, and more. So you can spend less time searching for important information, cataloging everything, and sorting everything to where it's supposed to go. And instead, the AI can help you out with a lot of that and essentially smartly sort your information so you don't have to. So you can just trust that your files and contracts are going to be organized in a way that makes sense for your company based on the way that you're using it. Another way that AI can help is you can also train it to assist in different processes. So if there are different tasks in your organization that are performed on a regular basis, such as approval processes, reviews, edits, just standard handoff procedures, say contract is supposed to go to X person and then it goes to Y person and then finally to Z person for approval, you can actually train AI to perform these tasks for you. So essentially, instead of someone having to fire off the workflow, someone having to manually email it to someone, the AI will take over. And once you've indicated to the AI, hey, this is ready to go, it'll move things along the process for you, allowing you to take a lot of that human error out of the process. Because one of the big things that interrupts the contract management process is human error. So essentially, if you want to send contracts out for review, if you're sending completed contracts out to general counsel, you can send those out. Or if you're trying to set up different NDA processes, again, it can help you set those up, get that out to the right people based off of your previous history and the work you're already doing. Moving on, you can also search for contracts and identify obligations, expirations, and renewals using the AI. So rather than having to, spend a lot of time ciphering through those, sifting through your contracts, trying to find all of the relevant information so you can pull it out and then, put it up somewhere so that people know what they're supposed to be doing. Instead, you can train the AI to search for those dates, set up notifications, and make sure that people are getting the tasks to do what they need to do. So it can notify you for specific dates before renewal. So like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, when obligations need to be completed. You can also set up notifications for when you're supposed to get that done by, or when that notification needs to go out to the people in your organization. You can also set it up for which contracts are expiring and within what time period they're expiring. So again, you can get those notifications and you can stay on top of that so you don't necessarily have to run into issues where you're running into auto renewals or you're losing someone's business because you didn't keep up on that contract. Next up, it can also help you determine which clauses are missing from a contract and also flag potentially problematic clauses for your organization. So kind of two sides of the same coin. So it essentially, making sure that you have everything you need in a contract does require a keen eye. That's why you have lawyers. That's why we have general counsel. However, by getting AI, it can look through these contracts and make sure that there are maybe standard clauses that need to be in there that your company uses, and it can apply those to that contract. So for instance, if there's like a special exemption or an exception that you've made and it's not reflected in the contract, the AI can go in there and it can say, okay, well, this needs to be in here, and it'll flag you and say, okay, make sure to add this. Or on the other side of the coin, it can look through the contract and it can say, well, this clause has been added. This could potentially spell an issue for your organization due to a conflict over on this side of the coin. And it can flag you to review those, check those out, send those off for edits, it gives you the power to really negotiate on that. So this way you're not missing anything that you need, or you're accidentally agreeing to something that could potentially hurt your company's bottom line and essentially make the contract harmful for your organization. So now that we've kind of determined that, let's talk about what benefits AI is going to have on contract management in your organization. So the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to reduce a lot of the time that you spend on contract lifecycle management just in general. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to reduce risk with third parties, which is pretty big. It's also going to increase your negotiating power. So the position you're negotiating from and giving you a more favorable one. It can also help you ensure compliance with contract terms. And then also it can help you make more informed decisions based on the contracts in your organization and what you're managing. So let's take a look at the first one. It reduces the time spent on contract lifecycle management. I remember reading somewhere that the average employee wastes about 19.3 hours a week on finding contracts, on finding documents they need, asking people the relevant questions, just trying to track down documents in general. And AI in contract management can really help you eliminate a lot of that, save, get time back so that you can be focusing on other areas. And it can also just shrink the life cycle down from something like 6 months to even half of that. Because instead of having to wait on approvals, on people not potentially getting notified, people forgetting to sign off on their approvals or send it on to the next stage of the process, AI just takes over and automates that. It says, okay, so you've done this, let's send it off to the next person. Okay, you've done this, let's send it off to the next person. Okay, this has been done, this person needs to be notified. Furthermore, since you're using it to sort your documents, make sure that everything's where it needs to be based off of the language in the contract, people can go into whatever system you're using to manage your contracts and find everything without having to scroll through a bunch of folders. Instead, they know where it is because everything's consistent. The AI is using consistent algorithms and a consistent understanding of your system to sort everything to where it needs to be going. So instead of having to take a ton of time to manage contracts to even just find what you're looking for, it instead just allows you to jump in, find it, do your bit, and then you can basically work and be assured that the AI is going to ensure a smooth transition and that everything's going to move a lot faster than it was before your company potentially switched over to using artificial intelligence in contract management. So from there, it can also help you reduce risks with third parties. So like I was saying before, with making sure that you have the right clauses in your contracts or potentially identifying problematic clauses, it allows you to keep track of that information. So if it's something that might potentially cause your company to incur financial risk, maybe take on extra burden, if there's a situation where they're requesting you take on more liability than you can financially do, that's a situation where you want to, keep track of that. You want to be able to negotiate away from that. And so using artificial intelligence can help you identify that. It also allows you to track third-party contracts faster. So it essentially gives you a breakdown and a presentation almost of all of the potential risks you might run into. It can also help you identify potential problems down the line with a contract. So it can say, okay, so this is what they've indicated. Here's previous performance. Here are contracts that we've worked with that are similar to this. Here are X, Y, and Z things that might be risks for us down the line. Let's make sure we're tracking that. Let's make sure we're keeping an eye on that. So if they do become a risk, we know we've known, we've been able to prepare, and we've accommodated for it. So this could be financial risks, these could be work risks, so essentially like the amount of time it takes to complete an obligation, or it might just be, say public perception risks. So say that, you're delivering something to them and they're not quite happy with the overall quality. You can say, okay, well, we've actually done everything that we can. We anticipated this, we're ready. So moving on from that into increasing this negotiating power. So it allows you to, AI allows you to be more responsive. It's faster. rather than having to rely on one person or multiple people to have to approve everything, to check over everything, to sift through it all. AI just pulls a lot of that information for you. It's going to be a lot faster because it doesn't have to take breaks. It doesn't have to, it's not going to get distracted. It's instead going to complete its task. And then once it does, it's going to pull out all of the relevant information you need. And then you're going to be able to come to the negotiating table with a customer or a vendor and say, well, we've identified these, X, Y, Z things, and we want to discuss these, and we potentially aren't happy with these, and we'd like to change these. And so, and then as they counteroffer and as you guys work in the contract, you're able to be faster and more responsive. So you can get the best possible terms for your organization, and you can get the most outcomes with a given counterparty. So that way you're not getting blindsided by anything, or even if you are blindsided by something, you're not getting completely wrecked by it. Instead, you can, pick yourself up, dust yourselves off, identify what you need to identify, figure out what you need to figure out, and come to the best decisions based off of the information provided and the insights provided by your artificial intelligence and your contract management system. Moving on from that, it can also help you ensure compliance with contract terms. Compliance is a major thing that a lot of organizations need to be on the lookout for. By being non-compliant, you risk running into regulatory fines, legal fees, damage to your overall reputation, because people aren't going to want to work with a company that regularly does not deliver on the terms of its contracts. So AI can help you pull all of the obligations that you need to have, all of the risks and guidelines that you need to be adhering to so that you can stay compliant, so that you can have that information and you can keep a step ahead, so you can assign people to perform the tasks that they need to do. You need to be monitoring that information so you can stay on top of it. So that way you can just really avoid the fines or legal fees that come up from being non-compliant. You can save your reputation, you can save money. Legal fees can run you anywhere from several $1,000s to millions of dollars based off of the damages and the size of the industries and the companies that you're working with. So really keeping ahead of that, identifying all of that information and staying compliant with the contract terms can help your company, and AI can help you do that. Moving on from that, and this is the last one, is that it can help you make more informed decisions. So essentially, AI can make connections that wouldn't be apparent to most people. So this allows you access to a broader perspective to your company's approach to contracts. So information or insights that might not necessarily come up to you or I will come up with an artificial intelligence. So it can say, okay, well, based off of this, based off of that, based off of something from 6 months ago, or even 3 years ago, depending on what information it has access to in your system, it can say, well, I actually recommend we do this. Maybe we should try this. And you don't have to take it as gospel, because it is still at the end of the day a machine. It still doesn't have the same level of understanding as a human. No, very few, like any artificial intelligence that you're going to apply to a contract management system isn't really going to be, it's not going to pass the Turing test, and there will be some flaws, but it's still important information that you need. Whenever you come to make a decision, any decision, you want to have access to as much information and insights as possible, especially when it comes to, your contracts, which can end up, either making or breaking your company when it comes to your bottom line. So, having access to that broader information, those maybe weirder or, off the wall insights can definitely help you come to better decisions and fully not fully, completely, maybe not completely alter the way you approach contracts, but it can definitely provide a different, a unique undercurrent that you might not have thought of in the past. So with that said, I think that's everything. Bit of a short webinar this time. Mostly because AI and contract management is a new field. Like, that's kind of one of the big things. It's only really been implemented in the last couple of years. So we're still really seeing a lot of how it's going to do. A lot of companies are applying it in a more limited capacity. Like, for instance, with the contract management system that we will be applying to our contract management system, at least initially, what that'll do is we'll be working with companies will be able to upload contracts, and our system will be able to pull out the important information. So it'll be able to pull out the expiration dates, renewals, different contract clauses that are in there, obligations that you need to be keeping track of, and then it can auto assign those out. And then it can also help you figure out what tasks need to go to what people and really inform how you approach that contract and how you manage it. So feel free to be on the lookout for that. We should have that by the end of Q2. So if you do want to sign up for a demo of that around that time, or if you want to get on our calendar now to start seeing that now and potentially talk to and get a deeper look at that, feel free to sign up for a free demo on our website, mydoc365.com. Head over to our contract management page, sign up for a free demo there. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat now. As we'll also be talking real quick about some of our upcoming webinars. So as I said, we do these every week. They generally vary in length. They can be from 25, 30 minutes all the way up to an hour. However, they never go beyond that. So next week we'll be doing and talking about important employee data that you should be tracking. So important information to keep track of. After that, we'll be doing why vendor compliance is necessary for business success. That'll be on April 6th. And again, these are all at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do send recordings of these after the fact, so feel free to sign up for them. And then also on the second Tuesday of the month, which we do every second Tuesday of the month, we'll be offering our SharePoint Basic Series. This time we'll be talking about metadata, so how to use it, how to set it up, how to make sure that you're using it properly. And then on April 20th, we'll be talking about important customer data you should be tracking. So the other side of that coin. If you'd like to contact us, you can reach us at 904-309-9970. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@mydoc365.com. Or if you have any questions about artificial intelligence or just SharePoint or business concepts in general, like contract management, feel free to reach out at me at qrussell@mydoc365.com. And make sure to follow us on LinkedIn at doc365. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to hear from you. If there's nothing else, I think that's going to be it for the day. This has been Quentin Russell with Doc365, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.